Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tes Zayin, Daf 16 of Masechta Yoma. Interesting daf, right? Right. We mentioned a dispute or two conflicting Mishnayos, one in Masechta Midas and one in Masechta Tamid, and we attempt to resolve it based on who could possibly be the default author of Masechta Midos. The reason why the Gemara is bringing this up is because it's similar to like we had the other day, was it yesterday even, about the distinction, the conflict between two Mishnayos one in Yoma and one in Tamid, and we tried to explain it in a similar way, based on Reb Shimon Ish HaMitzpah, whether or not he's the default author of Masechta Tamid. So we do something similar here. There's going to be like a little bit of some math, a little bit of like the architecture of the Beis Hamikdash and Har Bayis. So a whole bunch of like things over here. So let's get started. So we have a little bit of some Gemara to do on Daf Tesvav Amud Beis, because that's really where this whole daf kicks off. So about 15 lines from the bottom of Daf Tesvav Amud Beis. Tanan Hosam. You guys got it? Everybody has it? Let me know if you need help finding it. Tanan Hosam Amuloi Mamemune. As Rashi points out, the Sgan. I don't know, is it Sgan or Segan? I know it's definitely Sgan Kohen Gadol, but what about on its own? Is it Sgan or Segan? I don't know. I said Segan the other day. My friend said he thinks it's Sgan, but I thought maybe it's like only when it's connected to another word. I don't know. Let's go with Sgan. So Amuloi Masgan Amemune. So the Sgan Kohen Gadol, like sort of the deputy, I think that same friend sent me something explaining what that is. But I think it's like the same guy, I think, who would become the backup Kohen Gadol, who would become the Kohen Gadol if something happens with the psul with the Kohen Gadol in the quarantine. I think it's the same person that we're talking about over here. So he said to them in the morning, around the time of the Korban Tamid, Si'u v'aviu talim minishkas beis atzloim, go and bring a sheep from the office where they keep all the sheep. Si'u v'aviu talim, what did I just read that, right? Okay. And where was the office of the sheep? Where was the place where they had these sheep? And as we referenced, I believe, in Masechta Psachim, that they would always have at least 6 sheep that were being checked to make sure that they were tom, that they didn't have any mums, because the maximum amount of sheep that we'll ever need without being able to replenish is going to be 3. For example, if you have 3 days of Yom Tif, so then each day you require 2 sheep, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So they always make sure that there's going to be enough sheep on hand for 2 sheep a day over the course of 3 days. And they would keep these sheep in the Lishkas Beis Hatzloim, in the sheep office. So the Sgan, this deputy, would say to the Kohanim, go and bring a sheep for the Korban Tamid. And here's the important part for the Gemara, which is that this Mishnah says, there's a Mishnah in Tamid, and it says that the Lishkas Beis Hatzloim was in the northwest of the Beis HaMoked. What was the Beis HaMoked? The Beis HaMoked was this kind of big room in like on the northern wall of the Azara, about halfway through the northern wall. There was this big like room called the Beis HaMoked, and in there was a fire so that the Kohanim could warm up, as we learned about Masechta Shkalim, that the Kohanim would sometimes get sick because they were eating lots of meat and walking around Borvis, and so they can get sick. So in the Beis HaMoked there was a big fire for them to keep warm, and in each of the 4 corners of the Beis HaMoked there were 4 offices. Now we're saying that the Lishkas Beis Hatzloim, that this office where they had the sheep, was in the northwestern corner of the Beis HaMoked. Okay. And there were 4 offices in the Beis HaMoked. Achas Lishkas Hatzloim. So one, of course, is the sheep office. Achas Lishkas Achosamos. One of them is the office for the seals. Who remembers what the seals are? Remember, in Masechta Shkalim, and Daf Yud Gimel, we had a very interesting Mishnah that lists 15 people from the Beis Hamikdash and what they did. And we said that Yochanan ben Pinchas, he was in charge of the chosamis. He was in charge of the seals. And Achiyah was in charge of the libations. So you would go to Yochanan ben Pinchas and you would give him some money and he would give you a seal, and then you would take the seal over to Achiyah and he would give you whatever libations you need. So the office where at least the seals were kept, I imagine that that's also where you probably purchased them, was in the Beis HaMoked as well. Machas Lishkas Beis HaMoked. Then there's the office of the Beis HaMoked. There's the Beis HaMoked, and then there's the Lishkas Beis HaMoked, which is one of the four. Machas Lishkas She'osim Ba Lechem Apanim. And finally, there was the office that Beis Garmu, also from Masechta Shkalim. Beis Garmu would use this office to prepare the Lechem Apanim, which was their sort of secret skill. Ve'aminu, but we have a kasha. Now this Mishnah that we're about to quote is from Masechta Midos. We're going to learn Masechta Tamid and Masechta Midos all the way at the end of Daf Yomi. There were 4 offices that opened up into the Beis HaMoked. Kiktonios Hapsuchos Latraktin, like suites that open up into a banquet hall. Shtayim Bakodesh v'Shtayim Bachol. 2 of them were in the holy part of the Beis HaMikdash. So in the Azara, remember the Beis HaMoked was in the north wall of the Azara. So 2 of these offices were inside the Azara, they were holy. 2 of the offices were outside. I imagine, for example, the Lishkas Beis HaChosamos, if people wanted to be able to buy their coins, so the people standing would be outside of the holy part of the Azara. And inside the Beis HaMoked, there were strips of wood that would define which is the half that is inside the holy part of the Azara and which is the part that is outside, that is not holy. And what were these 4 offices? Ma'arav is Dromis in the northwest. So we had said that the northwest was where the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim was, right? No, but I read that wrong. Ma'arav is Dromis in the southwest. So meaning we had said in Tamid that in the northwest was the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim. Here we're saying that Ma'arav is Dromis, that in the southwest, Haisa Lishkas Tliya Korban was where the sheep office was. So that's really our question, which is how come in Masechta Tamid we're saying that the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim was in the northwest, whereas in Masechta Midos we're saying the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim is in the southwest. Now, Dromis Mizrachis, in the southeast corner, Hilishka Shayu Osim Ba Lechem Apanim, that's where the Beis Garmu would make the Lechem Apanim. Mizrachis Tfonis in the northeast, Bagan Zu Beis Chashmonai, Avnei Mizbeach Sheshiktu Malchei Yavon. In the northeast corner of the Lishkas of the Beis HaMoked is where the Beis Chashmonai, around the time of Chanukah, they took all the stones from the Mizbeach that the Greeks used to service their avodah zaras. So they had to dismantle those stones, and they put those stones in this office that was in the northeast of the Beis HaMoked. Tzfonus Ma'aravis, and finally the northwestern corner, which in Masechta Tamid we said was used for the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim, Bar Yarden the Beis HaTvila. In Masechta Midos we're saying that in the northwest corner, from that room, from that office, they would go down to the mikvah there in the Beis HaMoked. Very interesting. So, that's our question. Our question is, once again, how come in Masechta Tamid we're saying that the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim was in the northwest corner of the Beis HaMoked, whereas in Masechta Midos we're saying that the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim was in the southwest corner of the Beis HaMoked. What do you guys think? You have any suggestions? So says Rav Huna, well, who is the author of Masechta Midos? Who's the author of the Mishnah in Masechta Midos that says that the Lishkas Beis HaTzloim was in the southwest corner of the Beis HaMoked? It's Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov, and as Rashi points out, the stam de masnisin de midos kaime kavase, that the stam of the Mishnayos in Masechta Midos is like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Very interesting. Like we saw the other day also, I believe we said that also in Masechta Tamid, I think we also said that the stam of Masechta Tamid is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Okay? Or maybe not. Maybe Dafka Masechta Midos. Fine. Ditnan, as we learned in Mishnah, Ezras Nashim Aisa Orech Mea Vishloshim V'chomesh Amea Rocha Al Rocha Mea Vishloshim V'chomesh. So the Ezras Nashim knew. So you'd be in Har Bayis. There was the whole big Temple Mount, and now you're going to go in. You're going to go mamish to the holy Beis Hamikdash part. So what do? So you get to. What do you get to? I don't even know. Is there a special name for this gate? I don't know. But when you want to get, you know how the Beis Hamikdash is like this big square, and then like at some point in that sort of middle area of the square, there's like that big rectangle, and then inside that rectangle, there's like the Heichal. So we're talking about now you want to get into this like, sort of inner rectangle, right? So you got the big square, which is Har Bayis, now you want to get into like that rectangle area. So when you first get into that rectangle area, and of course you enter in from the east, so you're going to be in what's called the Ezras Nashim. That's where you go first. And from the Ezras Nashim, you can go in more to the next part, which is what's called the Azar Gedola. That's where the Mizbeach was and stuff. But the first thing was just kind of like a big square kind of space. So that's what's called the Ezras Nashim. And we're saying that the Ezras Nashim was 135 amis by 135 amis. It was square. Okay, fine. We're going to see a little bit later on today's daf that the next section of this Azara part was also, the same width of 135, but it was longer. It was 187 amos long. Okay, but the Ezras Nashim was a square, 135 by 135. And just like the Beis HaMoked, which was obviously much smaller because it was just like in the wall of the Azar, but it also had 4 offices. So the Ezras Nashim was this big square, and it had 4 offices, 1 in each corner. Misham shows what were these 4 offices. Dromis Mizrachis, so in the southeast corner. He Isa Lishkas HaNazirim, that was for the Nazirs, the Nazirites. That when the Nazir comes and offers a Korban Shlomim, when he's done with his Nazirus, that is where he cooks his Korban Shlomim. Megalchen Sayran, that is where they shave their head. Umishalchen Tachas Hadud, and they take their hair and they burn it under the pot. I believe that they're cooking the Shlomim. That's what the Torah says. Mizrachis Tzvonis, in the northeast part of the Ezras Nashim, Yaisa Lishkas Dira Eitzim. In the northeast part of the Ezras Nashim, that is where they had the office of the wood. Shesham Kohanim by Lemumin Omdin Maslin Be'eitzim. That if you have a Kohen who has a blemish, so he's unable to do the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, what he can do is he can hang out in the wood room and he can remove worms from the wood. Because any wood that has a worm, you cannot put on the Mizbeach. So you had a Kohen who was in the Lishkas Dira Eitzim removing worms from the wood. Who remembers what else happened in the Lishkas Beis HaEitzim? Masechta Shkolim. There was an opinion that the Aron is hidden underneath the Lishkas Dira Eitzim, and you had a Kohen who was removing worms from wood, and he noticed that the floor was a little bit different in one place, and he surmised that must be where the Aron is hidden. And remember, it said he like died because what was one opinion that like. What did we say, that like fire came out of his soul or something like that? Something very dramatic and exciting. Tzvonis Ma'aravis, northwest, Iaisa Lishkas HaMetzorayin, that was the office for the lepers. All right, where they would go and prepare for their to become unlepery. Well, on day 8, like once they become unlepery. Ma'aravis Dromis in the southwestern corner, Amr B'Eliezer ben Yaakov, Shachachni Ma'isa Mishameshes. What was in the southwest corner of the Ezras Noshim? Says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, I can't remember. Abba Shaul Omer, says Abba Shaul, B'hayu nosnin yain v'shemen, that's where they would keep oil and wine. V'yaisa nikres lishkas beishmanya, and it was called the lishkas beishmanya, the oil office. So, interestingly, so from the fact that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says he's listing all of the Mishnah is listing all of the offices, and when we get to the last one, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, oh, I can't remember. So what does that imply? That implies that the default Tana Darin is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So therefore, Rav Huna wants to surmise that when there's a conflict between the Mishnah and Talmud and the Mishnah in Midos, it must be that the Mishnah Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because the default of the Mishnayos in Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Says the Gemara, and the Taka makes sense to say that the Mishnah in Midas is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that the default Mishnayos in Midas is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. How come? The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, all of the walls of the Beis Hamikdash were very, very tall. If anybody's been to the Kotel in Jerusalem, it's very, very tall. And that was only like a small section of the wall. Chutz mikosel mizrachi. The exception being the eastern wall of the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know if this was in the Gemara or if Rashi pointed out. No, the Gemara is now going to say in a minute. But basically, all of the doorways in the Beis Hamikdash, all the entryways, were 20 amis tall by 10 amis wide. Now 20 amis, let's say, is 30 feet by 15 feet. That's a very tall opening. 15 feet. I think it's pretty tall. The room I'm in right now is, I think it's maybe like 8 or maybe 10 feet. But I said 15 wide. It's 30 feet tall. That's like 3 stories or whatever. The entryway. Now, the entryway was just at the very bottom of the wall. Then there was all the wall above the 3-story entryway. So the walls in the Beis HaMikdash were very, very tall. And again, as you can see from the Kotel, it's a very tall wall, and that's only like a small part of the height of the wall. Anyways, where were we? So Kol Aksalim Shayu Sham Hayu Gavoin. So all of the walls of the Beis Hamikdash were very, very tall. Chutz Mikosel Mizrachi, the exception being the eastern wall of the Beis Hamikdash, that was not very tall. How come? Shakoin Asarif Asapara, because when you have the Para Aduma and you have the Kohen who is burning the Para Aduma to make ashes to sprinkle on impure people. Omid Bahar Mishcha, so when he's burning the Para Aduma, he stands on the Mount of Olives, Umechuvan, Umechavin, Viroeh, Kineged Pischo Shel Heichal, Bishas Hazas Adam. And at the time that he sprinkles the blood of the Para Aduma, he's looking westward toward the Heichal, to see the opening of the Heichal inside of the Beis HaMikdash. And now the thing is, in order for him to be standing on the Mount of Olives and to be able to see straight through the Beis HaMikdash and see the opening of the Heichal, the eastern wall of the Beis HaMikdash had to be low. If it was too high, then his view would be blocked. Utanan, and we learned in a Mishnah, we're now going to mathematically prove, the math isn't too bad. If you could add 6 and 6.5 and 6 and 2.5, you should be able to manage just fine. If you can't, then we'll see you tomorrow. V'tanan, kol hapsachim sha'ayu sham, we learned in the Mishnah that all of the entries, all the entrances to the Beis HaMikdash, Govan Esrim Amma, were 20 amas tall. V'rochban Eser amas, and they were 10 amas wide. So it's around like 30 feet tall by 15 feet wide. If you do meters, I don't know what that is. Utanan, and we learned Lifnimi menu soreg. Okay, so now if you like when you before you get, remember we were talking about like the big square of like Har HaBayis, then you get like to the rectangle which has in it the Ezras Noshim and in the Azar Gedola. So surrounding this area with the let's just call it the Azaris, which is the Ezras Noshim and the Ezra Gedola, Azar Gedola, the Azaris. around it was this, what's called the soreg, was this like lattice work. That's what's called the soreg. V'tnan lifnim mimenu achel, eser amis. And then, to get into the azaris, so there would be this soreg, this lattice work wall on the outside. You then walk through the entrance to the lattice work wall. There was then another 10 amis, which was called the chel, which was this 10 amis space between the soreg and where you actually enter into the Ezras Noshim. Okay, and in this chel, in this space where when you enter into through the soreg, on your way into the Ezras Noshim, this 10 amma chel space had some stairs, which means that the elevation was increasing. Eser amas v'shtem eser milo saw Yushama. There were 12 stairs in the chel. Rumai lechatzi amma v'shilcha chatzi amma, and the height of each stair, of each step, was a half an amma, and its width, whatever, was a half an amma. So what was it? 12 stairs that are each a half an amma tall. So that's 6 amas. Okay. Tezvav mailas hayu olos mitocha yordos me'ezras Yisrael le'ezras Noshim. And we also said that there were 15 stairs, that if you're in the Ezras Noshim, you climb 15 stairs to get up to Shar Nikanor, where you enter in to the Ezras Yisrael, which is now already the Azara Gedola, right? So you go through the Ezras Noshim, you climb 15 stairs to get to Shar Nikanor, you then go through Shar Nikanor, and you're in what's called the Azara Gedola, and in the Azara Gedola, where you are right now, the first 11 amas there is what's called the Ezras Yisrael. After those 11 amas are what's called the Ezras Kohanim. After that is where the Mizbeach is. So again, so we're saying that there's 15 stairs to climb up to Shar Nikanor, to get into the Azar Gedola. Rum Maila Chatzi Amma V'Shilcha Chatzi Amma. And each stair also at a height of half an amma, and like I don't know what the word is, a width, whatever, but the platform of it was half an amma as well. Okay, so that's so 15 divided by 2, right? Because each one was half an amma. That's an additional 7.5 ammas. So 7.5 and 6 is 13.5. Okay. Vitnan, and we learned in the Mishnah, Bina ulam v'lamizbeach chav beizama. So if you walk through Shar Nikanor, there's 11 amas of Ezras Yisrael, 11 amas of Ezras Kohanim. Then you get to the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach, I believe, was 32 amas by 32 amas. Then between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, which the Ulam is the entranceway into the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKodashim. So between the Mizbeach and the Ulam was another 22 amas. V'shtem eser mailas hayusham, and there were another 12 stairs going up to get to the ulam. Rumayla chatziyama v'shulcha chatziyama, also each stair was a half an amma tall. So if you have 12 divided by 2, it's another 6. We're at 19.5 amas now. So remember, each entryway into the Beis Hamikdash was 20 amas tall. And we just described how as you walk through the Beis Hamikdash, if you enter into the Beis Hamikdash on the eastern side, and you're walking all the way through to get to the Heichal, you're going to be going up an elevation of 19.5 amas so far. Which means that so far, theoretically, if you're standing on Har HaZeisim, and you're looking through the entryway to the Beis Hamikdash from the eastern side, you could still theoretically see a half an amma of the Heichal. However, Utnan, but we learn in a Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Ma'la Oisa Sham, that there was a stair over there in the Azar Gedola, V'gavoa Amma, and it was an amma tall, V'ducha Nosun Alea, Uvo Shalish Mailis Shel Chatzi Amma, and there was a platform on it, and there were 3 stairs of half an amma each, which is another amma and a half. So there was an additional platform, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, in the Azar Gedola, there was another platform that had 3 stairs on it. The platform was 1 amma tall, and the stairs were each a half an amma. So that's another 2.5 ammas, which means 19.5 plus another 2.5, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that's 22, which is too tall. So if you're standing on Har HaZeisim and you're looking in to the Beis HaMikdash, and you're looking through the doorway in the eastern wall of the Beis HaMikdash, well, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, you're going to hit an elevation of 22 amas before getting to the Heichal, which means that you're not going to be able to see the Heichal from Har HaZeisim, because the Heichal is, you're going to miss it by 2 amas. And therefore, we need the wall on the eastern part of the Beis HaMikdash to be lower, so that you don't have to rely upon seeing through the doorways, which is 20 amas. You can see over the wall, and then you can see what you need to into the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, from the fact that we said that the default Mishnah in Midos said that the eastern wall was lower, according to whose opinion does the eastern wall have to be lower? According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Because according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the elevation of Har HaBayis increases by 22 amas before you get to the Heichal, which means that you wouldn't be able to see the entrance to the Heichal by way of the door of the eastern wall of Har HaBayis, because that's only 20 amas tall, and the Heichal is already at a higher elevation of 22 amas. Therefore, the eastern wall has to be lower so you could see over it, and then see, and then be able to see the Heichal, which of course is a requirement for the Kohen who's burning the Parah Adumah to be able to see the Heichal at the time that he sprinkles the blood. Therefore, it must make sense to say that the default Tana of Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Says the Gemara, Yoma Rabbanan Oika Palga da Amso de Mischazi le Pischa Begave. We said, but if you're the rabbis, you don't have that extra platform of an amma that has 3 stairs that are each half an amma for a total of 2.5 ammas more. If you're the rabbis, you don't have that extra platform. So therefore, you're at a total of 19.5 ammas, in which case, why do you need the wall to be smaller? You could just see through the entrance, all the way through the Beis HaMikdash until you could see the Eichel. Rather, it must be that the reason why the wall is lower is because the author of Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Very beautiful. Rav Ada bar Hava Amar Hamani Reb Yehudai. So Rav Ada bar Hava wants to say it's Reb Yehuda. So interestingly, Rashi goes on a whole arichis on Daf Tez Zayin Amud Beis and Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. A lot of Rashi. But at the very end of all that Rashi, on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, he basically gives his opinion to understand this next part of the Gemara, which is that Rav Ada bar Hava is coming to answer our initial question of the day, which is, we have a Mishnah in Midos. No, well, yes, but we have a Mishnah in Masechta Tamid that says that the Lishkas Beis HaTlaim was in the northwestern part of the Beis HaMoked. And we have a Mishnah in Midos that says that the Lishkas Beis HaTlaim was in the southwest corner of the Beis HaMoked. So which one is it? Is it in the northwest or the southwest corner of the Beis HaMoked? So according to Rashi, says Rav Ada bar Hava, Hamani Reb Yehudahi. So Rav Ada bar Hava wants to say that the stam of Masechta Tamid must be Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda argues on the stam of Masechta Midos. Let's say that again. That we're going to prove right now that the stam of Masechta Midos cannot be Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, if the stam of Masechta Midos cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, i.e., Rabbi Yehuda argues on the default author of Masechta Midos, well then, let's assume that the Mishnah in Tamid that argues on Masechta Midos must be Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rav Ada bar Hava wants to say. So Rav Ada bar Ahava Amar says, Rav Ada bar Ahava Hamani Rabbi Yehuda. Who's the author of the Mishnah Masechta Tamid? It's Rabbi Yehuda, and I'll prove it to you from the fact that he argues on the author of the Mishnah in Tamid, in Midos elsewhere, and because he argues there, I want to say, says Rav Ada bar Ahava, that Rabbi Yehuda is the one arguing on Masechta Midos in Masechta Tamid. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it says Rabbi Yehuda Mizbeach memutzav v'omid be'emtza azara, that the Mizbeach was smack in the middle of the Azara. So you'd walk into the Azara Gedola, and you would look right ahead of you. You'd walk through Shar Nicanor in the middle of the eastern wall of the Azara Gedola, and you'd look straight ahead and you'd see the Mizbeach. And it was 32 amas by 32 amas. Eser amas connected pischo shel heichal. So the middle 10 amas of the Mizbeach were directly opposite the entranceway to the heichal. Because as we said, all the doors in the Beis Hamikdash were 20 amas tall, 10 amas wide. So the entranceway of the heichal was also right in the middle of the width of the Azara. And we're saying that the Mizbeach, according to Rabbi Yehuda, was smack in the middle, which means that of the 32 amas of the square of the Mizbeach, the 10 middle ones were mamish opposite the entranceway to the Heichel. Yud Aleph Amal Tzafin v'Yud Aleph Amas L'Darim. Now, 32 minus 10 is 22. Divide that in 2, so you also have 11 amas to the north of the entranceway to the Heichal, and then the remaining 11 amas to the south. Nimta Mizbeach mechuvon keneged Heichal v'Kosalav. So we see that the Mizbeach is opposite the Heichal and its walls. V'sagadatech midos Rabbi Yehuda. And if it enters your mind to say that the default author of the Mishnayos and Masechta Midos is Rabbi Yehuda, that would be impossible, because the author or the Mishnayos and Masechta Midos argue on what Rabbi Yehuda just said. Let's see. Would you be able to find, if Rabbi Yehuda was the default author of Midos, would he be able to say that the Mizbeach was in the middle of the width of the Azara? Ve'atnan? But we learn in the Mishnah Midas, that the Azara Gedola, where the Mizbeach was, where the Heichal was 187 amas long and 135 amas wide. Min HaMizrach L'Mayrav, from east to west, Me'ah V'Shmonim V'Sheva, was 187 amas. How do we get that number? So when you enter into the Azara Gedola from Shar Nicanor, the first 11 amas was what's called the Ezras Yisrael. The next 11 amas was what's called the Ezras Kohanim. Mizbeach Shloshim V'Shtayim, and then you add another 32 amas for the Mizbeach. What are we up to? We're up to 54. Between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, meaning after the space after the Mizbeach until you get to the Ulam, which is the entryway into the Heichal, is another 22. So we're up to 76. The Heichal Kuf, boom. The Heichal is 100. That was easy. So now you're up to already 176. Kuf Amma, find V'yud Aleph Amma, Achore Beis Akaporis, and then behind the Heichal was another 11 Amas. So 176 and 11 is 187. That is how we calculate that the Azar Gedola had a length of 187 amas. Min Adarim Litzafin Me'ah V'Shloshim V'Chomesh, from the south to the north was 135 amas. Hakevesh v'Mizbeach Shishim V'Shtayim, the ramp towards the Mizbeach plus the Mizbeach was 62 amas. Min HaMizbeach U'Letabos Ches amas, plus from the Mizbeach to the rings where they would hold down the head of the animal when they would slaughter it. So between the Mizbeach and those rings was 8 amas. Makom HaTabos Esrim V'Arba, and then plus 24 amas for the actual place where the rings were. Min HaTabos Shulchanus Arba, then from the rings to the tables was another 4. Min HaShulchanus L'Nanosin Arba, and then from the Shulchanus to the Nanosin, they were like beams with hooks that you would then hang up the dead animal so you could flay it. And then from these beams to the wall of the Azar was another 8 amis. And whatever was left over, whatever the remaining calculations that we didn't mention were, which I believe is an extra 25 amis that we didn't account for, that was divided between the space between the mizbeach and the wall, and also where these beams were. So here's the thing. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says what? That there's a space from the wall until the mizbeach starts. Now we said that there was an extra 25 amas that was unaccounted for, right? Because there was 32, right? There was 30. We said that the ramp and the mizbeach were a total of 62. Now, and we also said that there was 8 amas between the mizbeach and where the rings start. So now we're up to 70. Then the rings themselves were 24. So now we're up to 94. We're up to 96, right? Meaning 62 and 8 is 70 plus another 4 was 94, plus another 24 was 94. Where am I? And then plus another 4 is 98. So now we're up to 102. Now we're up to 110. And we said that the whole width was 135. So 135 minus 10 is 25. And we're saying that you take the remaining 25 and you divide it up between the place where the beams were as well as the place between the wall and the mizbeach, which means that 25 divided by 2 is 12 and a half, which means that there was 12 and a half amis from the wall of the Azara until where the mizbeach begins. And then there's plus 62. So we're at 74 and a half, which means that the mizbeach ends at 74 and a half amis. Now, the thing is, the entire width of the Azara was 135. That divided by 2 is 67 and a half, which means that there's only, 7 amis. What was it? 67 and a half and 74 and a half or something. So that basically there's only 7 amis where the mizbeach overlaps, kind of extends past the halfway mark of the Azara. But which means that the majority of the mizbeach was in the south of the Azara. It certainly wasn't smack in the middle, right? Because we said the mizbeach itself was 32 amis, but there's only 7 right? We would need it 16 amas to be right. You'd have to get to the 16 amma mark halfway through the Azara, but we're getting to the 26 amma mark halfway through the Azara. So clearly, according to the default opinion of Masechta Midos, the Mizbeach was not halfway through the width of the Azara, it was in the south of the Azara. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda cannot be the default author of the Mishnah Midos. Right, so again, Midos Rabbi Yehuda, if it enters your mind to say that the author of the Mishnah Midos is Rabbi Yehuda, Mizbeach be'emtza Azara mimishkach asla, will it be found that the Mizbeach is halfway through the width of the Azara? Haruba the Mizbeach b'darum koi. The majority of the mizbeach is in the south of the Azara. So now Rashi, in order to go with his mahalach, changes this around a little bit. Elalav shmamina lav Rabbi Yehuda. Don't say elalav shmamina Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, rather elalav shmamina lav Rabbi Yehuda. So we see that the Mishnah in the default Mishnah in Midos cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda argues on the default Mishnayos in Midos, which means therefore that we want to say, according to Vada Bar Hava, that who's the author of the Mishnah in Tamid, who argues on the default Mishnah in Midos? It's Rabbi Yehuda, because we see that Rabbi Yehuda argues on the default author of Masechta Midos. Woo! What do you guys think of Daf Tesvav Masechta Yoma? It's kind of interesting. There was there was certainly technical bits, but there were also interesting bits. Basically, it's the context of today's daf is based on a machlokas between a Mishnah in Midos and a Mishnah in Tamid. The Mishnah Talmud says that the Lishkas Beis HaTzlaim was in the northwest of the Beis HaMoked, whereas the Mishnah Midos says that it was in the southwest of the Beis HaMoked, and we're trying to figure out how do we resolve this. So Rav Huna wanted to say, well, let's say that the author of the Mishnah in Midos is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is the default author of the Mishnah of the Mishnayos in Midos, and we proved it from essentially from two Mishnayos, right? One where Rabbi Eliezer, where the Mishnah is describing the Ezras Noshim, and then all of a sudden Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, and I forgot what the southwest office was for, which means that the stam up until then was Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And we brought another proof from the fact that the stam Mishnah says in Masechta Midos that the eastern wall of the Beis Hamikdash had to be lower so that the Kohen doing the Paraduma on Har Hazeisim could see the Azara, see the Heichal, and that would only be according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And Adar Rahav wants to say that the Mishnah in Tamid is Dafka Rabbi Yehuda, because we see that Rabbi Yehuda argues on the stam of Masechta Midos when Rabbi Yehuda says that the Mizbeach was halfway through the width of the Azar Gedola, which is unlike the Mishnah in Midos, and therefore, since we see that Rabbi Yehuda argues on the Mishnah in Midos, let's say that the Mishnah in Tamid, which argues on the Mishnah in Midos, is also Rabbi Yehuda. Alright, Chaver, well, what can I tell you? That was Daf 16 of Masechta Yoma. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.